Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. Unlike last weekend where there were 4 Derby preps taking place on Saturday, just one Derby prep this week. That is at Tampa Bay Downs. The feature race there is the Grade 3 Sam F. Davis. This one going a mile and a 16th on the dirt course, 20 Kentucky Derby qualifying points on the line to the winner of this race. A field of 12 signed on, and it shapes up as a pretty competitive affair. This race was supposed to feature a pretty heavy favorite, but Locked, who was initially targeted at this race, was not entered. Todd Pletcher, his trainer, announced last week that he had a setback, a minor fever. He'll be out for hopefully no more than a week or two. We'll return to the work tab. But without Locked in the field, this field has certainly ballooned to a larger size, 12 runners in here, and it seems like there's no clear standout among them. I would imagine that the number 9, Change of Command, will be the favorite. I haven't yet seen the morning line for this race, but he's coming in off 2 consecutive victories against Maiden and Allowance Company for Shug McGahee. An expensive $1 million Son of Into Mischief seems to come in off some good performances, but there are others that offer some intrigue coming into this race, including a couple of substitutes for the Todd Pletcher barn, one of those being the number 6, Agate Road, who'll be trying to make the transition from turf over to dirt. Certainly has the class credentials to stack up against this field, but unclear if he can do it on this surface. To get a sense of where those two might be placed in the early stages of this race, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this Sam F. Davis, and you'll see one of those runners, the number 9, Change of Command, is shown battling for the early lead with the number 3, Patriot Spirit, who is a horse stretching out from 6 furlongs all the way to this mile and a 16th distance. So that runner possesses plenty of early speed. You'd imagine they'll go forward from the inside post position, but Change of Command also tactical, so he figures to get forward position as well. You'll notice the number 6, Chicklet, Agate Road, is nowhere to be seen. He's actually listed along the bottom. He's a deep closer in this race, just has no early speed, but he does get that LP designation, indicating that he has the highest late pace rating in the field. So if this pace really does fall apart and you do see that fast pace flag showing up, it is possible that Agate Road could really benefit if he is able to handle the dirt. Let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with the number 1, El Principito. And this horse figures to be a long shot in this race. He's just coming in with inferior speed figures, faced off against at least one rival he'll meet again here in the Pasco Stakes last time. Finished 4th that day. Not that far out of second place, only beaten about a length and 3/4 by today's rival West Saratoga, but none of them were any match for the winner, Bookham Dano, who is, I think, going overseas to contest the Saudi Derby. Distance questions for El Principito, who hasn't yet been effective going 2 turns and hasn't yet raced against this class, so just seems like a real long shot in this race. Number 2 is Tireless. Let's take a look at his most recent race. This is one of the Todd Pletcher runners in this field, probably the bigger price of the two, and this is his most recent start when he broke his maiden at Tampa Bay Downs, going the 2-turn mile and 40-yard distance, and you can see he's pretty game to stay on and win this race over a rival who had also taken some money in this spot. He puts that one away as these two draw well clear of the rest of the field through the stretch. I just have some overall questions about the quality of the field that he beat. Didn't earn that high of a speed figure, only a 95. You look through the runners coming in there. None of them had run particularly fast speed figures on the way in. I believe the runner-up was actually a first-time starter, and Tireless was supposed to get the job done over that rival, getting bet down to 1-2 favoritism that day. So he definitely has some class questions to answer as he steps up against Stakes Company for the first time. And I found this DRF formulator fact for trainer Todd Pletcher that doesn't exactly give me confidence that this horse is going to be up to the task. A little bit surprising that with 3-year-old males in a graded stakes on the dirt that broke their maidens last time out, Todd Pletcher is actually 0 for 20 with this sample over the past 5 years. And that's a lot of horses that are trying Derby prep, stepping off maiden wins. Todd Pletcher hasn't had any success recently, although he has had some winners with this move, I think, going back over the past decade, but none so in the past 5 years. So just interesting standpoint there for Tireless. Let's move on to the number 3, Patriot Spirit. He is one of those that will be stretching out in distance. Actually, the horse shown sharing the lead on the pace projector, and this is his most recent start when he was a winner of the inaugural stakes. This was going 6 furlongs at Tampa Bay Downs, and you could see he actually rated effectively this day, stalking through the early stages, taking over an upper stretch. One of his rivals, Crazy Mason, is closing after him to finish second, and obviously crossing the wire with a bit more speed than Patriot Spirit does, but this was at least a nice step in the right direction for Patriot Spirit, who is having some trouble finishing off his races 2 and 3 back. He did try a mile, which is the longest distance that he's gone so far in the Iroquois in the second start of his 2-year-old season, but he was setting a fast pace that day, just ran off on the front end, was almost uncontrollable through the early stages and paid the price late, fading at the end of that race. They did take the blinkers off for the last race, and it seemed like that settled him down just a little bit, but he still is a horse with plenty of natural speed, so there are some questions about him getting the 2-turn mile on the 16th in this spot. Up next is that horse that was closing after Patriot Spirit in that inaugural stakes, the number 4 Crazy Mason. Let's take a look at his race that was run right after that, when he came back against optional claiming foes in a 2-turn mile and 40-yard race at Tampa Bay Downs. And he's not beating that much this day, but I like the way he finishes off the race. And it seems like this is a horse who really is getting better as they approach the finish. And he's just been doing this in his last few starts. He's just running through the wire powerfully. And what I like about this performance is he was able to overcome a very unfavorable pace scenario. You see the blue color coded pace figures for that last race in TimeformUS, but even beyond that, the early pace figures for this horse, 32, 49, 73. That's as slow as you're going to see in a dirt route. They were just crawling through the early stages. And while Crazy Mason wasn't 8 or 10 lengths off the pace, I mean, he did give away a significant advantage to one of his rivals he faces again here in Fulmineo, and still was able to run that run down coming to the finish line. He's got to improve a little bit on the speed figure scale, only getting up into the low 90s at this point in time, but I like his progression. I thought he ran better than it looks, even in that loss to Copper Tax, who he's facing again today, 3 back, when he was arguably against the pace scenario and not seeming to handle a muddy track at Delaware back in October. So Crazy Mason might be capable of better than his past performances indicate coming into this race. Number 5 is No More Time. This horse was scratched out of last week's Holy Bull to instead contest the Sam F. Davis at Tampa Bay Downs. And he ran pretty well 2 back to break his maiden. That race got a solid 98 TimeformUS speed figure. He was visually impressive, was somewhat with the race flow and pace that day, sitting right on top of those blue color coded fractions. But he did have a valid excuse when he came back and lost at a short price last time in the Mucho Macho Man. He hopped up at the start, got a little keen after that, made an early move wide around the far turn to contest the lead by the time they got to the quarter pole, and just couldn't really see it out after that, flattened out after making that early move. The thing I don't like about No More Time is we saw a few of those horses coming out of the Mucho Macho Man stakes last week, I should say, in the Holy Bull Stakes, and they all kind of disappointed a little bit. The likes of Attilo, Sea Streak, and Vagold, horses that came out of that race, none of them made a big impact on that Holy Bull, and it's not like that turned out, that looks like it was one of the better Derby preps that we'll see on the trail. So a little bit skeptical of the quality of No More Time coming into this race. The number 6 is Agate Road, and he is that horse that is likely to benefit from any pace that develops if he's able to handle the transition to dirt. And you could see this most recent replay we're taking a look at. This is a turf race, and Agate Road has done most of his recent running on the turf. His most recent start that we're looking at here in the Dania Beach, I wish I had seen a little more punch from him through the stretch. This is a horse who was a strong finisher through his first few turf starts as a 2-year-old, and you could see here, he's just not getting to that loose on the lead winner, Takayo, who was able to slow the pace down and wire the field that day. And just like Crazy Mason we talked about, it's really hard to close into pace figures in the 40s and 50s, which is what Agate Road was facing last time out in that Dania Beach. And he did okay to run up into second that day, but I'm not sure about the overall quality of that field. And while he did finish a decent 5th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf against much tougher at the end of his 2-year-old season, he got a pretty good trip that day, saving ground much of the way, and just didn't really have that late punch through the stretch to make a bigger impact against that field. And you look back at his big victory in the Pilgrim back in October of last year, and he got all those red color coded pace figures to run into that day. So you do wonder if he's a horse that needs the right setup. As for the switch to dirt, he's got pedigree to do it. Quality Road is a versatile sire, and the damn Yellow Agate, she was a grade 1 winner on dirt as a 2-year-old. She's produced Gasoline, who is a high level allowance dirt router on the dirt. So it just seems like Agate Road does have some signals to say from a pedigree standpoint he could handle it. Just I wouldn't want to take a short price on a horse trying to do this for the first time on the surface. You'll note he does have one prior dirt race. It came against turf horses and off the turf race at Saratoga. Don't want to make too much of that. The number 7 is Copper Tax, and this is a pretty intriguing runner coming into the Sam F. Davis. You could see he reeled off those 5 consecutive victories in the Mid-Atlantic region last year on the East Coast at Delaware, and then taking a show on the road to Laurel 2 back to win that James F. Lewis Stakes in very game fashion. If you watch the replay of that race, he got bumped around in the stretch multiple times, had to bull his way through traffic, and still got up to win that race by a neck. Now, he was somewhat disappointing, you could say, based on the result in that Remsen Stakes, finishing 6th to close out his 2-year-old season. But when you go back and watch the replay of that Remsen, doesn't look so bad in retrospect, taking into account the way the track was playing on December 2nd at Aqueduct. You really needed to have rail position at some point during your trip on that biased racetrack to have any real chance of success. And Copper Tax, breaking from post 9, was just hung out wide every step of the way, 4 to 5 wide around the clubhouse turn, continuing 3 to 4 wide around the far turn. Furthermore, he was ridden to get early position in that race, got a little keen and rank thereafter, didn't even settle that well until they got onto the backstretch. So Copper Tax had some legitimate excuses in that Remsen and still was finishing decently to pass some tired rivals in the stretch to get up for 6th that day. We've seen horses come back out of the Remsen to run pretty well in subsequent starts, not all winning, but horses that are at least confirming the quality of that race, like Drumroll Please, who came back to win the Jerome, even a horse who finished a little further back in the pack, a Domestic Product, came back to finish a good 2nd in the Holy Bull last week. So seems like Copper Tax has legitimate form from his 2-year-old season, coming back off a layoff here, but he's got a couple of 1-mile workouts at Laurel that should give him some bottom to get this 1.16 distance off the layoff. The number 8 is Ever Do It. He is a horse who's, again, going to be a big price in this race, like some others we'll talk about. Just hasn't run a particularly fast speed figure yet, was no match for a horse like No More Time, who finished far ahead of him in the Mucho Macho Man Stakes last time. At the very least, he figures to be a pace presence since he's done some of his best running towards the front end, but he'd be a bit of a surprise if he were in the trifecta in this spot. Number 9 is Change of Command. Let's take a look at his most recent start when he was winner of an optional claiming N1X allowance race at Gulfstream Park. He got kind of aggressive, willing this horse back just 19 days after he broke his maiden at Gulfstream Park. So you could see he's getting a little bit green and leg weary in the late stages of this race, but this was just his first attempt going 2 turns, running that first finish line of the short stretch at Gulfstream Park. And he gets the job done over his main rival that day, Cardinal. They ran well clear of the rest of the field, over 6 lengths ahead of the 3rd place finisher. And Change of Command has just been steadily improving his speed figures over his last few starts. Got a solid 104 back when he broke his maiden going 7 furlongs in impressive fashion, and moved up to a 109 last time. I will say you should take note of the fact that he was racing with Lasix in that optional claiming victory, and he has to come off Lasix to run in the Sam F. Davis, it being a Derby prep. So that's something you might want to take into consideration if that matters to you. But he did run a good race without Lasix 2 back when he broke his maiden, so I wouldn't get too concerned about it. Just the way he was idling a bit in the late stages last time, I do still have some questions about how far this horse ultimately will want to go if he's a true 1.25 mile type, but he only has to get the same 1.16 distance that he did negotiate last time, so Change of Command does seem like a legitimate contender in this race. One interesting note is Shug McGahee is putting blinkers on, making a change off of victory. That's a little bit unusual, and he also does lose his regular rider, Jose Ortiz, but you got to remember, Jose Ortiz probably was booked to ride Locked in this race, so the ride may have already been given to this new jockey, Tyler Gaffalione, before that defection of Locked took place. Wouldn't make too much of that. The number 10 is West Saratoga. He'll be looking to get back on track after putting in a bit of a lackluster effort, first off a layoff last time in the Pasco Stakes. He finished 2nd, but was 12 lengths behind the winner. Bookham Dano, just no match for that foe. Didn't get the most comfortable trip, breaking from the rail, was inside every step of the way. Looked like he was put in a little bit tight coming around the far turn, and just lacked some punch through the stretch, barely getting up for 2nd that day. He ran okay in a couple of starts last fall, obviously winning that Grade 3 Iroquois, going the 1-turn mile at Churchill Downs. He was the beneficiary of Patriot Spirit running off in the early stages that day, as kind of set it up for a horse to come from mid-pack in West Saratoga. I'm still not sure about the overall quality of this one. He was somewhat disappointing when he tried tougher in the Breeders' Futurity at the end of his 2-year-old season, so he's got to take a bit of a step forward, but he certainly has a license to do so, now coming 2nd off the layoff. The number 11 is Fulmineo. He's the one that got run down in the late stages of that allowance race last time that we looked at earlier in this preview by Crazy Mason. And like I was saying, Crazy Mason had much more working against him that day because he was closing into that slow pace. You could say based on the running line, it looks like Fulmineo also closed a little bit into that pace, but he got into pretty good position by the time they were on the backstretch. And he made that move to be right with the leaders coming around the far turn and really had every chance to finish off that race and seal the deal, and just couldn't quite do it. He was a horse that was transitioning from turf to dirt in that last start, and he got the right kind of trip for a horse that was making that move because he got to stay out of the kickback every step of the way, breaking from the outside post in a small field. He really never had to face much adversity in that optional claiming event. Now breaking from post 11 in a race where it looks like there are many more faster horses to his inside and outside. He's probably going to have to negotiate some kickback for the first time, and just a little bit concerned about the trip that this horse might pull and also his overall quality on the dirt. We'll round out the field with the number 12, Elysian Meadows, who was an intriguing runner in this race. We'll check out his most recent start at Aqueduct when he was beating a New York bred optional claiming field. This was a good step forward for him. It was just going 6 furlongs. He debuted going 6.5, cut back a little bit to go 6 furlongs in this first start against winners, but he's game to hold off the outside runner Mischief Joke. That horse arguably has a little bit of hang in him. He's racked up quite a few second-place finishers, but Mischief Joke did come back out of this race to win a stakes race against New York Brits in his next start, improving his TimeformUS speed figures by 10 points. So that flatters the form of Elysian Meadows a little bit. Does this horse ultimately want to be on the Derby trail, going a 2-turn dirt route? I think that remains to be seen. Pedigree clues don't give too much of a window into what this horse might want to do. He's by Versatile Sire, City of Light, and the Dam was much more of a turf router, so maybe distance will be his friend. Does he ultimately want to route on the dirt? I think that remains to be seen. He's going to have to improve from a speed figure standpoint and a class standpoint to beat a field like this, but you don't want to dismiss a horse that has upside in a race like this if he is a fair price. We'll see how much money this Belmont trainee does take. Well, let's throw up my field for this very intriguing edition of the Sam F. Davis. And when I was first handicapping this race, I initially thought I was going to put the number 7 Copper Tax on top. In many ways, I think he might be the horse to beat in this spot off of his form from his 2-year-old season and that better than it looks effort in the Remsen. But as I was going through, given the amount of speed in this race, I think that the number 4 Crazy Mason could get the right trip. He's going to have to get a little bit faster, but I like the way he's been closing into races that have been more dominated towards the front end in his last couple of races, and he's supposed to get a faster pace to close into this time and could fly under the radar given those inferior speed figures coming into this race. So the number 4 Crazy Mason for me, but I'm definitely using that number 7 Copper Tax as well in the Grade 3 Sam F. Davis on Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.